How I Killed My Excuses, Best Motivational Story. It was a cold, dreary morning when I found myself standing at the edge of a bridge, staring down at the dark waters below. The kind of waters that seemed to reflect every single mistake, every excuse I'd ever made. I thought about jumping. No, not literally, but into the overwhelming feeling of giving up on everything I'd ever wanted. In that moment, I realized something. Every excuse I'd ever told myself had kept me anchored to this very spot, paralyzed, watching life pass by. But what happened next would change everything. I wasn't just facing a challenge, I was facing myself. Every excuse, every reason I gave for why I couldn't move forward suddenly felt like a betrayal. And at that moment, something cracked within me. Not just a moment of clarity, but an undeniable truth that would shift everything I believed about my own potential. What I discovered on that bridge wasn't just about conquering excuses, it was about confronting the deepest parts of myself that were holding me back. You see, it's not about waiting for the perfect moment or the right motivation. It's about realizing that your excuses aren't just words, they're shackles. And the scariest part? I'd been holding the keys all along. But how did I go from this moment of paralyzing fear to finally taking the first step? And more importantly, what happened when I realized that killing my excuses wasn't just a choice? It was a transformation? I'll tell you. But first, let me ask you, what's the one excuse you've been telling yourself, and what's it really costing you? The fog hung heavy in the air, thick as the doubts swirling in my mind. That morning, the world felt too quiet, like the calm before a storm I hadn't yet seen coming. I didn't realize then how significant that moment would be. Standing on the edge of everything, staring into the abyss of my own fears, it all felt endless. The bridge beneath my feet seemed fragile, just like the dreams I'd told myself were out of reach. As I looked down into the dark waters, I could almost hear the whispers of my excuses. You're not ready. You don't have enough time. You're too young, too old, too inexperienced, too broken. And the more I listened, the deeper I sank. I stood there frozen in the grip of my own doubts, paralyzed by the endless list of reasons I had given myself for why I couldn't move forward. But something snapped. It wasn't a loud sound, more of a crack inside my own soul. A realization so sharp that it cut through all the noise of self-sabotage. It wasn't just the excuses I was fighting against. It was the idea that I was the one holding myself back. I had spent years pretending to be a victim of circumstances, blaming everything from bad luck to the wrong timing. But I had never questioned my own role in all of this. I had never wondered if I was the one keeping myself in this cage. As the winds picked up, a strange calm washed over me. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened, but at some point I let go. I let go of the fear, of the weight of all those excuses, of the notion that I wasn't good enough or strong enough to change my life. And for the first time, I felt a spark, something small but undeniable, a realization that I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to have it all figured out. What I needed was to stop holding on to the excuses that were keeping me from even trying. I remember the first time I dared to act on that spark. It wasn't as dramatic as the moment on the bridge, but it felt just as powerful. I was sitting in my small apartment, staring at my laptop, wondering if I would ever be able to make my dream come true. The world outside was noisy, full of distractions, full of reasons why I couldn't take that first step. But deep inside, I knew I had to. There was no other choice. It was then that I realized that killing my excuses wasn't just about pushing through the fear. It was about, looking that fear dead in the eye and saying, you don't control me anymore. But it wasn't easy. Every time I tried to step forward, the old voices crept back in. The voices that said, what if you fail? What if you're not good enough? What if you embarrass yourself? And yet, each time I faced those voices, something inside me whispered, so what? So what if I fail? So what if I'm not perfect? I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to be real, to be brave, to be someone who can try even when it feels impossible. It was in those small moments, the ones when I chose action over excuses, that I felt the transformation taking place. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't dramatic. But slowly, over time, I began to build something real, something I could be proud of. And with every step, the old excuses lost their grip. One night, I looked back on everything I had gone through to get to that point. The times I had almost given up, the moments when my excuses seemed like the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I realized then that those excuses weren't just obstacles. They were the most dangerous form of comfort. They were a lie I had chosen to believe because it was easier than facing the uncertainty of real change. But real change never comes from comfort. It comes from discomfort, from confronting the things you've been hiding from, even when it's painful. And that was the key to killing my excuses. I had to let go of the idea that I could control everything. I had to stop pretending that the perfect moment would come, that I would have everything I needed to succeed. I had to trust that the act of starting was enough, that the first step was the important one. I'll never forget the moment when I realized I had crossed the point of no return. It was simple, a quiet, almost unnoticed moment, but profound nonetheless. I was no longer looking back. I had started something, and no excuse in the world could convince me to stop. The voices of doubt still existed, but they had become background noise. The more I moved forward, the less power they had over me. And that in itself was the victory. Not the success that came later, not the achievements or accolades, but the fact that I had broken free from the chains of my own making. I had learned to kill my excuses, and in doing so, I had learned to live life on my own terms. But I want to ask you something. What's the one excuse that's keeping you stuck? And what would happen if you finally killed it? Would you be free to go after what you've always dreamed of? Or are you still holding yourself back, waiting for the perfect moment? I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you this. If you're willing to face your excuses head on, if you're willing to take that first step, you'll find a strength in yourself that you never knew existed. You'll find that you've been the key all along. And trust me when I say this, once you kill your excuses, nothing can stop you. So I want you to think about that one excuse you've been clinging to. What's it costing you? What's the one thing you could do today to start breaking free from it? Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the excuse that's held you back the most? And what's the first step you're going to take to let go of it forever? If this story resonated with you, share it with someone you know who needs to hear this. And remember, the only way to truly break free is to start now.